Have you ever woken up with hands so stiff and painful that even holding a cup of coffee feels like an impossible task? Have you ever felt the frustration of losing the ability to do simple things, like buttoning a shirt or peeling an apple, because arthritis has taken over your life? My name is Clara, and for over 2 decades, I lived with that exact pain, trapped in a body that felt like it was betraying me. But then, something changed. A simple, natural oil gave me back my hands, my independence, and my hope. In this video, I'm sharing my story, not to sell you anything or promise miracles, but to show you what's possible when you open your mind to a small change. Before we begin, I would appreciate it if you like this video. You can help me continue to spread the old age lesson. If you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like this video, please comment number 1. If you don't like it, comment number 0 to let me know, so I can make a better video for you. Now let's get started. My name is Clara, and I am 76 years old. For over 20 years, I have lived with persistent, gnawing pain in my hands, a condition diagnosed as degenerative, chronic, and incurable arthritis. Each morning, before I even set foot on the floor, I could feel the stiffness in my hands, as if they had transformed into unyielding stone overnight. The discomfort was a constant companion, a weight that seemed to anchor my every movement. Over the years, I exhausted every possible remedy in search of relief. Anti-inflammatory medications, while initially offering some respite, wreaked havoc on my stomach, causing burning pain and nausea that required yet more pills to manage. Topical creams, both over-the-counter and prescription strength, provided fleeting comfort, their effects fading as quickly as they came. I tried rosemary oil massages, adhesive pain patches, paraffin wax baths, physical therapy sessions, and even ventured into alternative therapies like acupuncture and herbal supplements. Some of these brought momentary ease, but none offered a lasting solution. The pain was relentless, returning like an unwelcome guest, day after day, year after year. Eventually, I resigned myself to the belief that this unyielding discomfort was simply my new reality, an inseparable part of who I had become. As the arthritis progressed, it began to erode my independence in ways I hadn't anticipated. Simple tasks like dressing myself became arduous. Buttoning a blouse or tying a shoelace turned into a test of patience and endurance. Preparing meals, once a source of joy, became a frustrating ordeal. Chopping vegetables or gripping a knife felt like an insurmountable challenge, and I often relied on pre-cut ingredients or avoided cooking altogether. I grew clumsier, slower, and increasingly dependent on others. Asking for help was a blow to my pride, yet there were moments when I had no choice. Opening a jar, carrying a heavy bag, or even turning a doorknob sometimes required assistance. Arthritis was stealthily stripping away my autonomy, and with it, a piece of my identity. I felt a quiet shame, not just for my limitations but for the way they made me feel like a shadow of my former self. Then, quite unexpectedly, I stumbled upon a glimmer of hope. A neighbor, someone I'd known for years, mentioned a natural oil she had been using to ease her own joint pain. She spoke of how it had restored mobility to her fingers, allowing her to perform tasks she thought she'd never manage again. I was skeptical. How could something so simple succeed where countless treatments had failed? I had tried so many miracle solutions, only to be disappointed time and again. Yet, her sincerity and the quiet confidence in her story convinced me to give it a try. I approached it with no expectations, fully prepared for another letdown. The first day, I noticed little difference, just a faint warmth where I applied the oil. By the second day, however, something subtle shifted. My fingers felt slightly less rigid. On the 5th day, I woke up and realized the familiar morning pain, the one that had greeted me for decades, was simply gone. It wasn't a dramatic, overnight miracle, but a gradual, almost imperceptible return of ease and mobility. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope, a sense that perhaps I could reclaim some of what I had lost. I'm not here to sell you a product or promise a magical cure. My story is simply that, a story of what worked for me after years of struggle. I share it in the hope that it might resonate with you, that it might offer a small light in the darkness of chronic pain. Before I go further, I'd love to hear about you. How old are you? Where are you reading or listening to this from? Have you experienced arthritis in your hands, or perhaps know someone who has? What is it like for you to live with this condition, or to witness its impact on someone you care about? Living with arthritis in the hands is far more than just physical pain. It's a slow, silent theft of the life you once knew. In the beginning, it was deceptive, masquerading as a minor inconvenience. I'd wake up with a slight tingling in my fingers, as if I'd slept on them wrong. Over time, that tingling gave way to stiffness, then swelling, until my hands felt like they belonged to someone else. Closing my fist became a struggle, as if my joints were locked in place, rusted and uncooperative. Everyday tasks that I once performed without a second thought became daunting obstacles. Cooking, which had always been a passion of mine, turned into a source of frustration. How do you dice an onion when you can barely hold a knife? How do you knead dough when your fingers refuse to bend? Even small joys, like writing a heartfelt note to my granddaughter or tending to my garden, became exercises in patience and pain. Beyond the physical toll, arthritis carries an emotional weight that no one prepares you for. There's a profound sense of loss, not just of function, but of identity. I remember one morning, struggling to button a blouse, my fingers fumbling and refusing to cooperate. I sat on the edge of my bed and cried, not because of the button itself, but because of what it represented, the countless small defeats that had accumulated over the years. Before arthritis, my hands were strong and capable. At 60, I could carry heavy grocery bags, scrub laundry by hand, and trim branches in my garden with ease. I felt vibrant, youthful, unstoppable. A decade later, at 70, I felt trapped in a body that no longer obeyed me, as if my hands had betrayed the person I still was inside. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. The invisibility of arthritis only compounds the struggle. From the outside, my hands looked normal. No casts, no bandages, no visible wounds to signal the pain within. But every movement was a negotiation with discomfort. Should I write that note by hand, knowing it would leave my fingers aching? Could I open a door without wincing? What would happen if I dropped a cup and couldn't bend to pick it up? These questions became a constant undercurrent in my life, shaping every decision, every action. Winter was particularly cruel, as the cold seemed to seep into my joints, freezing them from the inside out. Nights were no refuge either. Shifting in my sleep could trigger a dull, throbbing pain that refused to let me rest. Over time, I learned to adapt, to accept this diminished version of my life as normal, as if there were no other way to exist. The daily reality of arthritis was a cycle of frustration, fear, and growing dependence. Mornings began with a quiet battle, even before I opened my eyes. I knew the stiffness and swelling would be there, waiting like an unwelcome guest. Moving my fingers felt like turning a rusted gear, each motion accompanied by a creak of discomfort. Some days, I lingered in bed, staring at the ceiling, willing the stiffness to subside. It never fully did. Simple tasks like lifting a coffee mug or brushing my hair required patience and strategy. I began to plan my days around my limitations. If I needed to drive, I avoided using my hands for other tasks in the morning to conserve their strength. I relied more and more on others. My daughter to open stubborn jars, my neighbor to fetch items from high shelves, the pharmacy to deliver medications that kept me functional, if only for a few hours. This dependence brought with it a creeping fear, of the arthritis worsening, of losing even more of my independence, of one day needing help with the most basic tasks, like dressing or bathing. No one wants to feel like a burden, especially after a lifetime of self-reliance. But perhaps the deepest wound was the gradual loss of my sense of self. Arthritis didn't just take my mobility, it dimmed my spirit. I stopped accepting invitations, avoided social gatherings, and retreated to the familiarity of my home, where at least the environment was predictable. Yet even there, among my own belongings, I felt confined, as if my world was shrinking day by day. My hands, once a source of strength and creativity, now felt like strangers, no longer capable of the tasks that had defined me. When doctors diagnose arthritis, they often deliver the news with a sense of finality. There's no cure, only management. But no one tells you how to manage the emotional toll, the way chronic pain reshapes your life. I embarked on a years-long quest for relief, visiting countless doctors, specialists, and therapists. Anti-inflammatory medications were the first line of defense, prescribed almost reflexively. For a while, they dulled the pain, but the relief came at a cost. My stomach rebelled with heartburn, nausea, and a constant unease that required yet another set of pills to counteract. Creams, patches, and therapies followed, each promising relief but delivering only temporary respite. I clung to the hope that something, anything, would break the cycle of pain. Until that natural oil came into my life, I had all but given up on finding a solution. What I want you to take from my story is this. Even when it feels like all hope is lost, sometimes a small, unexpected change can make a profound difference. For me, it was that oil, a simple remedy that, against all odds, restored a piece of the life I thought I'd lost forever. It didn't happen overnight, but with each passing day, I felt my hands become a little more my own again. If you're living with arthritis or know someone who is, I hope my story offers a spark of possibility. What has your experience been like? What small victories or challenges have shaped your journey with this condition? I'd love to hear your story, to know how you've navigated this invisible but all too real struggle. The journey through my chronic pain began with physical therapy, a twice-weekly commitment that became both a lifeline and a burden. I would make my way to a small clinic in town, where a compassionate young therapist, with a gentle smile and steady hands, guided me through a series of exercises designed to restore mobility to my aching fingers. She applied heat packs to loosen my joints, taught me stretches to ease the stiffness, and encouraged me to push through the discomfort. Each session brought a fleeting sense of relief, a momentary lightness in my hands that felt like a small victory. But the relief was frustratingly temporary. If I missed even 2 days of therapy, the familiar ache would creep back, as stubborn and unyielding as ever. The clinic was a 30-minute drive from my home, a journey that became increasingly daunting as my hands struggled to grip the steering wheel. And then there was the cost. Each session chipped away at my savings, a financial strain that weighed as heavily as the pain itself. Eventually, with a heavy heart, I had to stop going altogether. In the absence of professional help, I turned to home remedies, a patchwork of suggestions gathered from well-meaning friends, neighbors, and glossy magazine articles promising relief. I tried everything. I soaked my hands in warm vinegar mixed with coarse salt, the sharp scent filling my kitchen as I hoped for a miracle. I brewed turmeric and ginger infusions, sipping the bitter liquid with a grimace, willing it to work. I rubbed my hands with alcohol infused with rosemary, the pungent aroma clinging to my skin. I even wrapped my hands in hot compresses made from eucalyptus leaves, their earthy scent briefly soothing my senses. Some remedies offered a fleeting calm, a momentary distraction from the pain, but others did nothing at all. Yet, in my desperation, I clung to each one, hoping the next would be the answer. When you're in pain, you'll try anything, no matter how far-fetched it seems. Next came the natural supplements, an arsenal of pills and capsules that turned my kitchen counter into a miniature pharmacy. Glucosamine, collagen, omega-3, turmeric capsules. I swallowed them religiously, chasing the promise of relief. At times, I felt more like a chemistry experiment than a person, my body rattling with the weight of so many supplements. But morning after morning, the pain remained, a relentless companion that greeted me as I opened my eyes. The stiffness in my fingers, the throbbing in my knuckles. It was as if the supplements were powerless against the arthritis that had taken root in my body. Disappointment became a familiar ache of its own. I returned to the doctors, seeking answers from rheumatologists, internists, and even alternative medicine practitioners. Some listened with patience, their eyes kind as they scribbled notes and offered encouragement. Others seemed detached, prescribing new medications without so much as a glance in my direction. Each month brought a new prescription, each one carrying the promise of change. Steroids, anti-inflammatories, painkillers. I tried them all, dutifully following instructions, hoping this would be the one that worked. But the relief was always partial, always fleeting. The medications dulled the pain for a few hours, perhaps a day, but it always returned, sometimes sharper than before. The side effects, nausea, fatigue, a foggy mind, added their own burden, and the emotional toll of chasing false hope was almost as exhausting as the pain itself. With each failed attempt, I felt myself slipping deeper into resignation. The idea of living with this pain forever began to settle over me like a heavy fog. I started to adapt, to accept that this was my life now. I stopped reaching for objects that required too much grip, avoided tasks that demanded dexterity. The worst part wasn't the pain itself, it was the way it changed me. I became more passive, more withdrawn, more tired. I stopped searching for solutions, convinced that I had exhausted every option. I was on the verge of giving up entirely, surrendering to a life defined by limitation. Then, unexpectedly, something shifted. It wasn't a grand revelation or a miraculous cure. It was a quiet moment that sparked a glimmer of hope. I wasn't looking for it. I had long since stopped searching. That afternoon, I was sitting at my kitchen table, sharing a cup of coffee with Carmen, my neighbor of many years. At 81, Carmen carried her own share of aches and pains. Yet that day, there was something different about her. She moved with an ease I hadn't seen in years. Her hands, usually stiff and slow, seemed more fluid as she reached for her cup. Most strikingly, she didn't mention her pain, not once. For Carmen, who often shared her struggles with arthritis, this was unusual. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Curiosity got the better of me. Carmen, I asked, what's different? You seem better. She smiled, a knowing glint in her eye, as if she'd been waiting for me to notice. From her bag, she produced a small, dark glass bottle with a simple label I didn't recognize. It's an oil, she said, her voice steady with conviction. Not just any oil. A friend's sister recommended it. She gets it from a farm in the south. It's natural. I was skeptical. I had tried too many miracle remedies to believe in another, but then Carmen extended her hands. Her knuckles, once swollen and knobby like river stones, looked softer, less inflamed. They weren't perfect, but they were undeniably better. She told me she'd been using the oil for just a week and noticed a difference by the 2nd or 3rd day. I took the bottle from her, its glass warm from the afternoon sun. I unscrewed the cap and inhaled. The scent was strong but pleasant, a blend of herbs with a faint citrus undertone, evocative of open fields and forgotten summers. I poured a small amount into my palm, and the oil felt dense yet smooth, gliding over my skin without the greasiness I'd expected. It was warm, enveloping, almost alive. Carmen explained her routine, massaging it into her hands each night before bed, using slow, circular motions to work it into her joints. As she spoke, I felt a quiet resolve forming within me. I wasn't convinced it would work, but I was out of options. This would be my last attempt, not out of hope, but out of necessity. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, the bottle in my hand. I poured a few drops of the oil into my palm, just enough to cover both hands, and began to massage it in, following Carmen's instructions. I moved slowly, deliberately, working the oil into my knuckles, my palms, each finger. The warmth of the oil seemed to seep into my skin, soothing the tension in my joints. The scent filled the room, grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't a cure. I felt no sudden absence of pain, but there was a subtle shift, a loosening of the tightness that had gripped my hands for so long. For the first time in months, I went to bed with a sense of calm, not because the pain was gone, but because I had taken a small step toward caring for myself without the weight of expectation. The next morning, I woke to the familiar stiffness, but something was different. The pain was still there, but it was less sharp, less consuming. I could close my fingers with a bit more ease, rest my palm on the table without wincing. I told myself it was a fluke, perhaps I'd slept better, or the weather was kinder that day. But I repeated the ritual that night, massaging the oil into my hands with a little more intention. By the 3rd day, the changes were undeniable. My hands were less swollen, my fingers more pliable. Simple tasks, holding a spoon, turning a doorknob, felt less like battles. I opened my bedroom window without resorting to my elbow, a small act that felt like a triumph. On the 4th day, something remarkable happened. I decided to peel an apple, a task that had become nearly impossible in recent months. Gripping a knife, turning my wrist, applying pressure, it had all been too painful. But that morning, without overthinking it, I picked up the knife and the apple. My hand felt steady, the blade firm in my grip. Slowly, I peeled the fruit, the skin curling away in one long, unbroken strip. When I finished, I stared at the apple, its smooth surface a quiet testament to what I had accomplished. Tears welled in my eyes, not just for the apple, but for what it represented. It was proof that something was working, that my hands were capable of more than I had believed. By the 5th day, the change was unmistakable. I woke without the usual dread of moving my hands. I flexed my fingers, one by one, waiting for the familiar stab of pain. It didn't come. The stiffness was still there, but it was softer, less oppressive. I wrote a short note to my granddaughter, my handwriting steadier than it had been in months. I tied my shoelaces without assistance. I turned on the radio, my fingers finding the knob with ease. More than the physical changes, something deeper was shifting. The resignation that had weighed on me was giving way to curiosity, to possibility. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope, a word I hadn't dared to speak until now. The oil wasn't a miracle cure. It didn't erase my arthritis or banish the pain entirely. But it gave me something I hadn't had in years. Moments of ease, small victories that reminded me I was more than my pain. It was a quiet beginning, but with each passing day, its impact grew, weaving itself into my life in ways I never could have imagined. I sat on the edge of my bed, my mind clouded with confusion, my body suspended in a moment of disbelief. My hands rested in my lap, and I stared at them as if they belonged to someone else. Foreign, unfamiliar, yet undeniably mine. These were the same hands that had greeted me every morning for years with sharp, unrelenting pain, their silent screams echoing through my joints. But this morning, they were quiet. Still. I studied them closely, turning them over, tracing the familiar lines of veins and knuckles with my eyes. I touched them, hesitantly at first, feeling the warmth of my skin, the slight roughness of age. Then, in a moment of daring I hadn't attempted in years, I did the unthinkable. I closed my fists completely. No pain. Not a twinge, not a protest, not even the faintest whisper of discomfort. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I opened and closed my fists again, testing, waiting for the familiar ache to return. It didn't. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, my hands obeyed without resistance. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't a partial improvement, a fleeting moment of less pain. It wasn't a subtle reduction in the stiffness that had become my constant companion. It was absence, pure, unadulterated absence of pain. It was peace, settling into my joints like a long-lost friend returning home. I couldn't recall what it felt like to move without hesitation, to not brace myself for the inevitable sting. My hands, once a source of frustration and limitation, felt like they belonged to me again. I stood slowly, almost afraid to disrupt the moment, and walked to the kitchen. The morning light filtered through the window, casting soft rays across the counter. I turned on the tap, the cool metal of the faucet smooth under my fingers. I picked up a glass, plain, ordinary, the kind I'd struggled to hold without wincing for years, and filled it with water. No discomfort, no stiffness, no resistance. The motion was fluid, effortless, like a memory from a younger version of myself, from a time when I didn't think about my hands because they simply worked. I sat at the kitchen table, the glass of water resting in front of me, and something inside me broke open. Tears welled in my eyes, spilling over before I could stop them. They weren't tears of sadness or pain, but of disbelief, relief, and overwhelming gratitude. It was as if an invisible weight, one I'd carried for so long I'd forgotten it was there, had been lifted. The absence of pain was only part of it. What truly overwhelmed me was the release of fear, the shedding of helplessness, the quiet return of independence. 4 years, I'd lived with the constant dread of what my hands could no longer do, of how they dictated my days. Now, in this quiet kitchen, with the hum of the refrigerator and the soft drip of the faucet, I felt free. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. That day, I came to a profound realization. The body has a memory. It remembers not just pain, but resilience. When you treat it with care, when you give it a chance to heal, it responds in ways that can surprise you. Sometimes, it gives you more than you dared to hope for. And for me, it all began with a small, unassuming bottle of oil. It was the 5th day of using the oil, and the pain that had once ruled my mornings was nearly gone. I found myself asking questions, my curiosity sparked by this unexpected transformation. What was in that bottle? What made it so different from the countless creams, pills, and treatments I'd tried over the years? This wasn't magic. It wasn't some sleight of hand or placebo effect. Something real was happening in my body, and I needed to understand why. I began my search for answers. I pored over the label on the bottle, squinting at the fine print under the dim glow of my bedside lamp. I flipped through books on natural remedies, their pages worn from years of neglect on my shelf. I called my daughter Clara, who had always been fascinated by holistic healing, her voice bright with excitement as she shared what she knew. Over weeks, I pieced together the story of the oil. Not a single miraculous ingredient, but a carefully crafted blend of natural elements, each with centuries of history and wisdom behind it. The primary component was hemp oil, rich in essential fatty acids like omega-3 and omega-6, renowned for their potent anti-inflammatory properties. I learned that hemp oil absorbs quickly, penetrating deep into the skin to calm inflammation from within, like a gentle tide soothing a restless shore. Another key ingredient was arnica, a golden-flowered plant used for generations to ease bruises, muscle soreness, and joint pain. Its effects were almost immediate, a cooling balm that seemed to hush the angry protests of my joints. What fascinated me most was how these ingredients worked together. Arnica, I discovered, improved circulation, reducing the swelling and stiffness that made my hands feel like they were locked in place. Then there was ginger, an ingredient I'd only known as a warm, spicy addition to my cooking. Applied to the skin, its subtle heat relaxed my muscles, melting away discomfort like sunlight on frost. Lavender was another surprise, not just for its calming floral scent that eased my nerves, but for its ability to relax tissues, creating a sense of relief that was both physical and emotional. It was as if my entire body exhaled with each application. Some versions of the oil included turmeric, a vibrant root with powerful anti-inflammatory properties, or rosemary oil, which stimulated blood flow and warmed my hands from within. There was even clove oil in some blends, known for its numbing effect on sensitive, painful areas, a quiet, natural anesthetic. Each ingredient had a purpose, a role in the symphony of relief that had transformed my days. I didn't uncover this knowledge all at once. It came slowly, through late-night reading, conversations with Clara, and even cautious searches online. The more I learned, the more I realized that nature often holds answers that modern medicine overlooks. I found studies, simple, straightforward ones, not buried in jargon, that confirmed what I was experiencing. They spoke of how these natural ingredients, when combined thoughtfully, could significantly reduce joint pain, especially in older adults like me. It wasn't a hidden secret, it was knowledge that had been there for centuries, waiting to be rediscovered. I was simply one of the many who had stumbled upon it, late but grateful. Not all oils are created equal, I learned. Quality matters, the source of the ingredients, the way they're blended, the care taken in their preparation. But when done right, and when used with patience and consistency, the results could be profound. For me, this was the revelation. It wasn't magic, but science rooted in nature, tangible and grounded. The oil alone wasn't enough, though. I quickly realized that how I used it was just as important as what was in it. Over time, I developed a routine, simple, deliberate, and deeply personal. Twice a day, once in the morning after waking and once at night before bed, I would sit quietly and apply the oil. I didn't need much, just a few drops to cover both hands. The small amber bottle, with its faint herbal scent, lasted me weeks. I began each application by warming the oil between my palms, letting it lose its chill before touching my skin. Then, I massaged it in slowly, deliberately, using my thumbs to press gently on the most tender spots, around my knuckles, along the base of my fingers. I moved finger by finger, knuckle by knuckle, feeling the oil sink into my skin, its warmth spreading like a soft glow. I made circular motions across my palms, then stretched my fingers outward, as if coaxing them back to their natural shape. It wasn't just about applying the oil, it was a ritual, a moment of connection with my body. I never rushed. Those moments became a sanctuary, a pause in the rhythm of my day, a small act of self-care that felt almost sacred. I learned that heat amplified the oil's effects. After each application, I'd wrap my hands in a warm towel, letting the gentle heat help the oil penetrate deeper. Sometimes at night, I'd slip on soft cotton gloves to hold the warmth in, waking to hands that felt softer, looser, more alive. I also began doing gentle stretches before each massage, opening and closing my hands slowly, rotating my wrists in smooth circles, stretching each finger with care. It took only 5 minutes, but it woke up my circulation, preparing my hands to absorb the oil more effectively. Another discovery was the importance of hydration. Drinking water, something so basic I'd never given it much thought, made a surprising difference. Keeping my body hydrated helped my tissues recover faster, my joints less prone to inflammation. I also learned to store the bottle properly, in a cool, dark drawer beside my bed, away from sunlight that could degrade its potency. That little bottle became a constant in my life. Not a strange product, but a quiet, reliable ally. As I shared my story with friends, neighbors, and others in my community, something remarkable happened. Their voices began to echo mine, weaving a tapestry of shared experiences. People I'd known for years, and some I'd only just met, started telling me their own stories of pain and relief, of skepticism and hope. Each one was a reminder that I wasn't alone. There was Marta, a former coworker who, at 79, had battled psoriatic arthritis for decades. The condition ravaged not just her joints but her skin, leaving her hands swollen and sore. She called me one afternoon, her voice trembling with excitement. After 5 days of using the oil, she'd buttoned her blouse without help for the first time in years. "I felt young again," she said, and I could hear the smile in her words, mirroring my own joy. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 4 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Then there was Luis, an 83-year-old carpenter who lived near my nephew. His hands, gnarled from years of osteoarthritis, had betrayed him, making even simple tasks impossible. In a letter written in shaky but determined handwriting, he shared that on the 3rd day of using the oil, he'd picked up a hammer without dropping it. "I'm not going back to work," he wrote with a playful tone, "but I want to feel like I could." Elena, a friend from the Senior Center's reading group, was 75 and had lived with rheumatoid arthritis for over 15 years. She'd been skeptical, relying solely on prescription medications and thermal gloves to manage her pain. But after hearing my story, she decided to try the oil. A week later, she told me she no longer needed her gloves inside the house, a small victory that felt monumental to her. What struck me most was the commonality in their experiences. Though each had a different form of arthritis, a different story of pain, they all described the same thing. With consistency, relief came quickly. Not a cure, no one claimed miracles, but real, measurable changes. Less swelling, smoother movements, pain that faded to a whisper or vanished entirely. Above all, they spoke of reclaiming control, of feeling their bodies belonged to them again. A pattern emerged. Those who applied the oil twice daily, with care and intention, saw improvements in less than a week. It wasn't about magic or instant fixes. It was about consistency, about showing up for yourself day after day. Hearing Marta, Luis, and Elena made me feel part of something larger, a quiet community of people refusing to let pain define them. Today, I can say with unwavering honesty, I am not cured. Arthritis is still there, a shadow that lingers in my joints. It doesn't vanish by wishing or with a single bottle of oil. But it no longer controls me. It no longer dictates my mornings or fills me with dread as I reach for a cup, a pen, or a doorknob. My hands feel like mine again, capable and alive. This oil wasn't a cure, but it was a doorway, a small, unassuming entry to a new way of caring for myself. It gave me back something I hadn't realized I'd lost. Hope. Hope that I could still improve, that age and illness didn't mean surrender. With my heart open, I invite you to try it. Not with grand expectations or promises of miracles, but with an open mind and a willingness to give yourself a chance. Relief doesn't always come from a hospital or a prescription. Sometimes it comes from nature, from consistency, from rediscovering faith in your own body. When I apply the oil now, it's more than a physical act. It's a ritual of care, for my hands, my spirit, my independence. It's a reminder that small, intentional acts can carry profound weight. If you're tired of living with pain, don't close yourself off. You have nothing to lose by trying. Like me, you might find that what you needed wasn't another pill, but a touch of nature, a commitment to yourself, and the courage to believe in possibility. Thank you for joining me on this journey, sharing my story of rediscovering hope and reclaiming my independence from the grip of arthritis. I've opened my heart to you, sharing how a simple natural oil transformed my daily life, bringing relief where I thought none was possible. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What have you learned from my experience so far? Please comment below with one thing you've taken away from this video and plan to put into practice in your own life. Your story could inspire someone else, just as mine might have inspired you. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.